Raise some
Cain. You gotta raise some Cain. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some Cain, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some Cain.
Welcome to the Raising Cain Show, where we dive into the most pressing issues facing our nation. Today, we tackle the critical topic of border security amidst the ongoing migrant surge and human trafficking crisis like nothing we've ever seen. We are honored to have with us a distinguished guest who brings unparalleled expertise and firsthand experience to that discussion. Mr. Victor Avila is a retired Supervisory Special Agent with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, under Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. With a career dedicated to safeguarding the American homeland, Victor has led investigations into human trafficking, drug smuggling, and violent crime. He has also served as an accredited diplomat to Mexico, Spain, and Portugal, advising these governments on complex criminal investigations. Victor's bravery and commitment were tested to the extreme during his time with ICE-HSI. While on assignment in Mexico, he survived a violent ambush by the Los Zetas drug cartel, an attack that tragically claimed the life of his colleague, Special Agent Jaime Zapata. This harrowing experience, along with his relentless pursuit of justice, is detailed in his book, Agent Under Fire, A Murder and a Manifesto. Beyond his investigative work, Victor is a national ambassador for Veterans for America First and a vocal advocate for robust border security solutions and public safety. He has traveled across the United States, sharing his insights and expertise to raise awareness and drive action. Victor's expertise is matched by his remarkable achievements, including setting the world record for longest handgun shot in 2020. He currently resides in Texas with his wife, Claudia, and their two children, Sophia and Victor Emilio, remaining actively engaged in his community and civic affairs. And with that, please join us in welcoming Victor Avila to the show as we explore the urgent fight against open borders and the migrant surge and human trafficking. Hey, Victor, how you doing? It's good to have you on the show, and I appreciate you coming on. I'm really looking forward to discussing a lot of these topics. I think it's something that a lot of Americans are passionate about, but to be honest with you, most Americans don't have much experience, with the things that you've done and been involved with, and so it'll be a real insight to hear it, coming from the horse's mouth.
Absolutely, and great to be with you, Nate. Thank you so much for having me, and we have a lot to talk about.
Definitely. So, I kind of gave an introduction, about you and shared a little bit about your background, but would you mind just kind of getting into a little bit about your career expertise, particularly your role in Homeland Security investigations and Immigration and Customs Enforcement?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked, I'm born and raised in Texas, on the border from El Paso, Texas. Border security and border life is what I've done most of my career and most of my life. And I've worked at every different level of government, at the local county level, state level, federal level, and as you mentioned, international level, working overseas as well. And so I bring a very robust and unique experience when it comes to border securities. I understand borders, I understand foreign policies, and domestic policies attached to those securities that work and do not work. And so I've worked as Homeland Security Special Agent. We work and investigate violations of law that have a nexus to the border. So anything that touches our border, whether it's a lot of times under the name of ICE, people think it just became an immigration agency, but they forget that there's a lot of customs stuff that we deal with, and tariffs, and a lot of things that deal with on a daily basis when it comes to the border. A lot of the different types of smuggling and trafficking on goods and people, of course, and the drugs. But we also have different things like pharmaceuticals and things that you have in your house that you use every day, like toothpaste, that we want to make sure that that toothpaste that you're putting in your mouth every day is actually the toothpaste that you bought, that you think it is, and not some counterfeit product. So we deal with a lot of that as well. And it goes on and on, from counterterrorism and public benefit frauds, many frauds, marriage frauds. I've worked a lot of different types of investigations, and a lot of them obviously are linked to our border.
Wow, that's a lot more than what I expected. But that makes sense, especially I think about the counterfeit goods. There's a lot of folks, of course, during COVID and everything else, they wanted to get, ivermectin and things like that. And I've often wondered, how do we really know what we're getting if you go down to Mexico and you walk into a Mexican pharmacy and whatnot. But I'm
glad you actually, by you mentioning that, has been a big issue in Mexico, by you actually going into a pharmacy in Mexico and getting counterfeit pills that contain fentanyl, and you think you're safe because you're getting it from a pharmacy. And you're not. And you mentioned COVID really quick. There was a big case by HSI, a seizure of millions of masks. Remember those things they made us wear?
Right.
Well, they were counterfeit. And so not only were they were bad, they were worse. They made you sicker. So those are the type of things that Homeland Security is looking out for you.
Wow, that's good to know. Your personal story is quite a story, and I don't want to belittle it at all. And so I want to have you back to get into a real in-depth, discussion about your story and what happened in your survival of the Los Zetas gang cartel ambush. But can you tell us, just in a brief synopsis of a little bit about your personal story, including your survival of Los Zetas drug cartel, the impact of your colleague, Special Agent Jaime Zapata's death, and what insights that somebody that you can share from your book. We're going to put a link to your book, Under Fire: A Murder and a Manifesto, in the show notes, and so folks, I would really encourage you to check out this book. But just to give you a little taste of what's in it, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Absolutely, the book will really go into a lot of detail. And also you'll get an incredible briefing, believe it or not, on the border, and a lot of stuff that is going on today. You will get a good understanding of what's going on. But I went through this horrific event and ambush on February 15, 2011, while I served in Mexico. Agent Zapata was there as well, and we got assigned to this dubious assignment to travel on the highway that we weren't supposed to at that time. And on the way back from that highway, we were ambushed by Los Zetas cartel. 8 cartel members surrounded our armored Suburban, and a lot of things happened there. They opened fire on us, and Agent Jaime Zapata was tragically killed in the line of duty. I'm here by the grace of God, being shot 3 times, surviving that horrific ambush. And so that incident has done a lot of things, not just for me personally and my family. It definitely turned the life of my life and that of my family upside down. And it has a lot of political implications, and also that of the cartels. And we could talk a little bit further in the show about how the cartels have evolved, because I think that's very important. I followed the cartels for many, many decades, and I could tell you they're not the same organizations that they were back in the 1980s. They are different. I consider them terrorists now. And so that incident in February in 2011 really was a marking point that shifted and where we are today. And I'll explain further when we talk a lot about the cartels. But nevertheless, there was a lot that happened afterwards. Fast and Furious weapons were discovered that were used against us. You remember that? So I'll just put it to you this way: my family and I got the short end of the stick under the Obama-Biden administration because all I did was serve, and I served proudly, defending my homeland. And the government was very effective in turning the tables around and making me look like the bad guy, like somehow I did something wrong. Nevertheless, May of 2015 ended up taking a medical retirement because a lot of issues, and there's a lot more to say about that, as you can imagine. Yeah. But nevertheless, I want people to know that it was an international incident that changed a lot of things.
Yeah, it sounds awfully familiar. Of course, I went through I was a federal whistleblower, went through the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act with the FBI, and blew the whistle on the FBI's cover-up of crimes related to Uranium One, Hillary Clinton, and included things like terrorism financing. It included things like money laundering and public corruption, securities and exchange fraud. I'm talking massive amounts of money. And I went through, I saw clearly that they were covering this up, and they were shutting down investigations where they had analyst notes that, basically said, yeah, this is going on. But for political reasons, they shut it down. So I went to the IG, and it took almost a year to get through that process. But within I think it was 3 or 4 months after I finished my final disclosure, I got raided by the FBI, 16 agents, coming to my own. So it's unfortunately, and it speaks nothing to, to many of the agents that work, in the intelligence community or in, border security. There's a lot of really good guys, but make no mistake, there are some bad guys too, and so without a doubt,
I put two corrupt, federal agents in prison. I don't talk about a lot of times about that publicly, but because people kind of shy away from that. Sure. They don't want to think that
they don't want to, and they don't want to disparage, the good guys that are patriots that love this country and that are doing their job. There were guys at my raid that were good guys and that, did nothing wrong. There was one agent in particular who, made it his personal vendetta to go on a witch hunt and basically run a separate op against me. And, he was eventually removed. But it is something that is real. And certainly the leadership, under a corrupt president, leads to, further corruption within the ranks, and it's sad, and corruption within the policies. It's a horrible thing. That's one of the reasons why I'm really glad, actually, that the Supreme Court has made some changes in regards to the Chevron ruling. I think that many of these agencies have way too much power to interpret the law, and I think it's important that our representatives are doing that. So. But I don't want to get into too much of a discussion off of the point. But I appreciate what you've done and the work and the service to your country that you've made. Let's talk about the current state of border security right now. I mean, everybody knows right now it sucks. It's horrible what's going on. But I'm very more specifically, what are the main factors that you think are driving the current increase in migrants? And how does that compare to previous surges that had occurred?
Great question, because I'm going to give you the update of as we're talking today, because it changes. It's been so fluid. It's not the same as 3.5 years ago. It's not the same as 6 months ago. And sometimes when I go to the border, I just got back from El Paso, Texas, 3 days ago, and it probably won't be the same next week. And that's how important it is to be on top of it. But right now, you've heard the left say that the numbers have diminished dramatically, 40% decrease in numbers. And they're not lying to you. And they're not lying to you because this is how they get away with saying this. is that, yes, the numbers of the people, of the illegals turning themselves in to Border Patrol agents, the give-ups, the ones that you see come up through the river to Texas, Arizona, or California, turn themselves into Border Patrol, yes, those have diminished. Why? But this is the problem. This is the problem that they don't tell you why. Why? It's not so much they want to give Biden the credit, which I will not. But I'll tell you why. And it's a deal, a secret deal that the Biden administration made with the government of Mexico earlier this year. As a matter of fact, they made it in December of last year. And the Biden administration, he sent Blinken over there and Secretary Mayorkas. Then Mexico sent their people over to Washington, D.C. This was very, very well calculated because of politics, because of the political atmosphere, and especially because Mexico was having, and they just had presidential elections last month. And so obviously we're going through an election cycle ourselves. Mexico is a big factor in all this, and they know it. The Biden administration knows it, and they know that they're hurting when it comes to border security because it's now the #1 issue across the country. And so they said to Mexico, help me help you type of thing. And so Mexico said, you know what, let's do something for themselves. So for the U.S. and for us, so we could get back and stay in power in Mexico. And by the way, the new president of Mexico, which I think is sworn in September, her name is Claudia Sheinbaum. She's a communist. And so you have a communist now, a full-blown communist next door to us, not 6,000 miles away in the Middle East, next door to us in that country. And they said, we're going to help the Biden administration look good to help them stay in office. And that's why the numbers have actually diminished. But here's the problem. You know what numbers have actually increased that people are not talking about are the Godaway numbers. Because let me tell you who else adjusted to this change, and that's the cartels. The cartels change, very fluid on a daily basis according to every single word that comes out of this administration's mouth. And they immediately said, well, you know what, we're not going to worry about whether 2,500 people are going to come in and whether they're going to stop them or not stop them, shut the border. We're going to get you in one way or the other. You see, the cartels don't care if you have to pay them no matter what, whether you turn yourself in or whether you get smuggled in the back of a tractor trailer. To them, it's no difference, but they will get you in. And so what's happening now is they're smuggling you in without any detection. And I can tell you, because I just saw this firsthand in far west El Paso, Texas, and southern New Mexico this past weekend. I was there with the Border Patrol, and I saw it firsthand. Runners, people and all illegals, all in black, trying to avoid Border Patrol, jumping the Trump wall and sliding down from it. And this is real. I found a magazine, a gun magazine, a Glock gun magazine, fully loaded with one of the illegal aliens' belongings thrown in the desert. This is what's going on in the Wild Wild West, and this is cartel land. And this is what's happening now in West Texas and Arizona, where they're coming in, not detected, not counted. Here's the other one really quick. CBP One app is this one app that's invented by this administration to allow illegal aliens to come in country, not counted as illegals, treated as illegally entering through a port of entry, and in another category of illegals flying in directly from their country into ours.
Jeez.
All of this is 100% unconstitutional, 100% illegal, yet as frustrating as it is, and you might hear it from my voice, I'm sitting here almost sometimes helpless, not being able to do anything about it, watching it happen. And I've seen it happen for the last 3.5 years. And it's very, very disheartening because I am seeing the destruction of our country, one neighborhood at a time. And I've been saying it this is not new to me. I've been working in immigration and illegal immigration and cartels and all that for many, many years. The difference here is that the people that are coming in here now illegally are very different than the economic migrant that wants to come to the United States and assimilate and be an American. Like my parents came to this country And they, first of all, they came here legally. Second, they assimilated to this country because they wanted to be Americans. They followed the U.S. Constitution. They didn't break the law. They weren't a public charge to the federal government. As a matter of fact, they were contributors to the community via the church and other ways, and raised their children, me and my sisters, to flourish, and we did. And so I'm the product of the American dream, and I'm proud of it. But I'm also very, very, very worried that that's not happening. That American dream doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. And these people are bringing their culture, their ideologies. And let me tell you, when I say their culture, I say it because I'm talking about police culture. I'm talking about interacting with police. I'm talking about ideologies, political ideologies, religious ideologies, and implementing them right here, right where you live. And I don't have to prove it to you. You can see all the crimes that these illegals are right. carrying out all throughout the United States.
Well, and they're not, and it's not just coming from South America, where people have maybe a similar Christian culture and whatnot. These people are coming from all over the world and from many places where you mentioned this is another issue that concerns me too. This issue of communism at our doorstep. I think it's a much bigger problem than most people realize. Now, my background I've worked in the intelligence community, and I have an understanding of things that that most people don't get to see. And I will tell you that Venezuela, their communist government's involvement in these surges and in the trafficking of humans and all of that it plays a big part. And to know that they have a communist ally now in Mexico. Cuba has a communist ally. China has a communist ally. This is not good. We are being surrounded by.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth.
And so I want to get into that a little bit more too. Can you discuss the human trafficking crisis at the border, including the scale and severity of the issue, and the key areas where trafficking is most prevalent?
It's a huge problem. I can tell you because I'm a subject matter expert in human trafficking investigations and victim identification. And I rescued many women and children from those horrific conditions, some that I'll never be able to share publicly. That's how horrible they are. And I did put one example of a case that I worked in my book because, believe it or not, Nate, a lot of people would, from the left, want to accuse me of making that up, that child trafficking isn't real. I'll tell you what, I wish it wasn't real. And I wish I could take those images from my head of what I've seen in person and images of what one human being is capable to do to another, especially a child. It is evil. That's the best way I could describe it. And so that's existed. Well, right now, these human traffickers, and this is where I want to break it down for you. There's two different crimes committing right now. It's human smuggling and human trafficking, and they're not the same crime. A human smuggling crime is a one-time venture. The illegal pays and it's over.
Right.
The human trafficking is the exploitation of that person or child for either sex slave trade or forced labor. But the cartels never used to be part of this. There used to be human trafficking organizations. There used to be human smuggling organizations. Well, not anymore. The cartels have taken over all of it. And that is a big change of how we approach it, because the cartel realized, hey, wait a minute, these human beings pay a lot of money, and they rightly so, in the billions of dollars. So they took over, and they're not only bringing victims from all over the world, they're getting victims from within the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
And victimizing them here and exploiting them there. And
well, when the cartel can operate, with impunity within our own borders, as we've seen, there were videos of these guys crossing the border at night, and they were armed to the teeth, man. And they're operating inside the U.S. With inside our borders. It's no surprise that they're going to look at opportunities to make money here in the United States outside of drugs, and like they talk about in I'm trying to remember the name of the movie, but I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about, where that was recently released that had talking about the cartel, or talking about the human trafficking.
Sound of Freedom.
Yes, Sound of Freedom. Thank you. There's that scene in there where he talks about that they sell drugs and and it's a one-time transaction, but they sell a child for 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 sex, it becomes multiple transactions over and over and over again. And it absolutely becomes something that these guys, they're going to look for every opportunity, to have not just children south of the border, but children that are blonde, blue-eyed, children that are black, children that are Asian. I mean, they want to provide their clientele with everything, so they're gonna try to kidnap and take kids out of American homes. They're going to go after, of course, runaways and kids that they can easily get their hands on. But it's a huge human tragedy that has been made completely possible by the current administration. In fact, I see the Biden administration essentially as the biggest aider and abetter of human trafficking in world history. So
You're not wrong. They're the number one aider and abettors. Joe Biden is probably the number one human trafficker in the world, because it's because of his policies that all these other organizations are able to do what they do. And here's an alarming statistic. There's been almost 400,000 unaccompanied children allowed into this country by Joe Biden. Unaccompanied, meaning these are children by themselves. Well, they've lost almost 100,000 of them. Yes, lost. That means that Health and Human Services, Border Patrol gets them, sends them over to Health and Human Services, and they're supposed to find a sponsor for this child. Well, the sponsor, no one knows who the sponsor is. No one is checking or vetting the sponsor to see if, in fact, there's the next of kin there, or there's a family associate, nothing. And so there are people receiving these children, and I tell you, as blatant as I can, people receiving these children for free, and we don't have no idea where they're at. We lost them. We don't have the address. We don't have the location. We don't have anything to follow up. And yet, you remember when they accused President Biden, President Trump back then? It was, I think, the kids in cages and all this.
Right, yeah. Which all those pictures happened during the Obama administration.
But, yes, but that was, a few thousand. Now you're at almost 500,000 children, and no one blinks an eye. The same thing with the fentanyl. They've had they're averaging 100,000 deaths a year, over 100,000 deaths a year. Fentanyl, opioid poisonings, and deaths. Yeah,
and they're doing things like
more than any other war. Yeah. And no one blinks an eye, and no one's doing anything about it.
Well, there's an interesting thing too that's happened, an interesting transition, I guess you could say. As you were talking about how the cartels they're constantly changing, their tactics, their methods, the things that they're doing. They basically it's evolving. And on this issue of fentanyl, there's a couple of things that I've noticed trends. I've done some work with the DEA, and so I'm very familiar with a lot of the fentanyl crisis and what is happening there. And I'll tell you, what concerns me is that, and you mentioned it yourself, that you got people going into pharmacies, and they might be getting fentanyl laced products, or you get some kid who's never done drugs before, maybe goes to a party, he pops what he thinks is ecstasy, and it turns out it's laced with fentanyl, and he has a heart attack. And so you have a kid that's not a junkie, he's not some kid that is hooked on drugs, but he dies the first time he's ever experimenting, just being a dumb kid. And we're seeing these kinds of trends. There was we had an issue where we saw that the cartel was producing fentanyl tablets that were kind of rainbow colored, and that looked like they looked just like the Sweet Tarts candy.
Oh yeah.
Now there's only one reason for doing that sort of thing, and that's because you want to kill children. So I really do see it as this is a war on America. It's a war on our on our citizens. How do you make a big deal out of 20,000 people that get sick with COVID, but you're not going to make a big deal about the real killer that is coming from south of the border, and ultimately the precursor chemicals that are being provided directly to the cartels from China. So this is a war. It's an asymmetric war, but nonetheless it is a war, and they've decided to wage war on our civilian population.
If you recall, back in the 80s, the crack epidemic cost 10,000 lives. And remember that, how big that got and how concerning that was? And that was 10,000 lives. We are at hundreds of thousands of lives lost. And I tell you, I've met many of these families. As a matter of fact, I'll be in Washington, D.C. in a couple of weeks talking on behalf and supporting the families. They're called Lost Voices of Fentanyl, of thousands of individuals. Will be right across the White House, in between the White House and the monument, speaking there to bring the awareness to them to act, because you're absolutely right. How could you not? I mean, if we have things to compare it to, and if you just do that, the comparison you just did, which I do all the time, it makes no sense. So just because the death is not with a bullet and it's not with a bomb, to me, death is death. And it's a silent killer that I think, as a matter of fact, is even worse, because they're getting at us even with larger numbers. But the key here is the bigger picture when you talk about border security, and that's China. You mentioned the countries that I was going to mention: China, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran. Well, guess what? They're friends of Mexico. They're friends of Mexico. They're in Mexico. I can tell you, they've been in Mexico for a long time. I used to interview these what we call special interest aliens when I worked there, and I was the first time I went in there, like, what in the world are these people doing here? People from Bangladesh and Syria and Yemen and Somalia, and like, what the heck are they doing there?
I imagine that
into a country to possibly do some harm.
Well, there was I remember. There was something that got exposed from, I don't know if it was a whistleblower or if it came out through some of the leaked diplomatic cables or something under Snowden, but there was information that came out years ago about that there were terrorist training camps south of the border. I mean, literally, our enemies south of the border in training camps that were being protected by the cartels. Now, I imagine, the things probably haven't gotten better. So,
no,
it's insane. The level of corruption, the level of disinterest, that everybody wants to make a big deal about, the media will go to great lengths to cover, Donald Trump's, trial about him paying off a porn star or something, but they don't seem to give a crap about the people who are dying in this country over fentanyl and its illicit trafficking of it in our country and in every state. In fact, West Virginia is where I live. We have the highest per capita rate of people dying from fentanyl. My wife and I, when we were campaigning, we stopped on the side of the road and we spoke to a lady in some back holler and just talked to her for a little bit. And the lady broke down crying because she had just saved her neighbor's daughter. She happened to have Narcan, and she was able to save her neighbor's daughter who had overdosed on fentanyl just 2 nights before that. And it's such an epidemic here. And and on that note, like, there's certain things that we will see in states like West Virginia, right? The effects of how the drugs have affected us. You got other places like Maryland where they just had a murder of a young woman by 2 illegal aliens. So you've got other places where there's been murders all across the country, but there's another impact that affects the border states that we don't see necessarily unless we're down there and actually see it firsthand. And that's how it impacts the economy and the strain on social services and public resources and its effect on the local job markets and wages and all those types of things. I remember, was it Cesar Chavez, back in the day, he was accused of going down to the border with union workers, and they would whip the illegals that were swimming across the Rio Grande, and send them back because they didn't want them affecting the wages. And I remember talking to my brother years ago who's he lives in California, and he's a union member. He's a electrician. And I was talking to him about it. I was like, yeah, these guys, I repeated the same old line you always hear people repeat. Oh, they're not taking jobs anybody wants. And he says, oh, bullcrap. He says, it totally affects the wages because one of these guys will work for next to nothing because it's way more than what they make in their country. And it's driving down the wages for us guys that, went and got certified and got bonded and all of that. He says, because they'll work for nothing without certification, without bonding. And, and he says, it's not good. And when he really opened my eyes to that. So tell me a little bit about the economic impact, particularly in states like Texas where you live, and and other places that are surrounding border towns. I remember seeing pictures of El Paso, just the airport filled with homeless people.
Oh yeah, they're still they're there, but they're hiding them now. By the way, thank you for bringing the economic impact, because a lot of people are not talking about this. I know the crime is the obvious one. Yes, the healthcare system is probably one of the biggest one. But if you think about it, it's the healthcare system that they're not paying these bills. But who's stuck paying it? You and I are.
Right. That's right. And good luck. Good luck if you need to go to emergency room. And I grew up in Southern California, and they passed a law a long time ago that said that you couldn't refuse service to anyone, whether or not they had insurance. And so you had people that were illegals that were basically going to emergency room for common cold and stuff like that. And I remember one time waiting with a major, I think it was appendicitis or something like that. Man, I waited for hours, and then when they finally got me in there, they rushed me into surgery because I could have died. And it was because of all the, the illegals that were in there, for things that were not emergencies.
It's happening every single day in El Paso, Texas, in McAllen, in Eagle Pass. They're overwhelmed let's talk about the ERs real fast, because a lot of the illegals, by the way, now that I just got back from El Paso, there are a lot of them that jump this wall and break their neck, break their back, break their whatever. And some die, some don't. Well, the ones that don't die need medical attention. Again, you and I are going to pay for it. And it does two things. It's the economic impact, but it also takes the Border Patrol with them to what they call a hospital watch to oversee the illegal alien. Then you have the other illegal alien that comes out and fakes that they have some type of illness, so they could go to a hospital instead of going to the facility. So all this type of manipulation is happening with the healthcare system. And let me tell you, it's no longer just at the border states. It is happening in New York. It is happening in Chicago. It is happening in Denver. Denver Health was at $130 million deficit in Denver. Why? Because of the illegal aliens that they were treating for free. And you know what Denver said? Because they're a big sanctuary city. Instead of saying, secure the border and let's shut it down, no, they're asking the federal government for reimbursement of that money, because the left always thinks that if you throw more money in it, it goes away.
Which they will eventually just tax all of us at the federal level for.
Correct. So we got the healthcare system. We've got the school system.
Oh,
goodness. Woo, man.
That's a very, very good one. I have a personal testimony about, again, like I said, I lived in California for my first 18 years, but my wife and we moved back there for a period of time. And I think about 4 years we were living there when our children were in elementary school. And the school, California has the largest budget, I think, of all of the states in terms of their education, yet they are ranked like down at the bottom. And I can tell you part of the reason is because they're spending a large portion of their budget on English as a second language for the children of illegals. It's that simple. Right. And in fact, it was so bad that the dubious part of it was that you had Mexico actually running radio commercials for they were running radio commercials in English. So this is the only reason I know, on our radio in California, basically saying that if your children didn't have Spanish textbooks, they could get Spanish textbooks from the government of Mexico. They would send them to them. So they're aiding and abetting this problem, and it's crazy.
Well, when it causes, Nate, it eventually something's got to give, right?
Yeah.
The school systems, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system. I talked to a lot of sheriffs and police chiefs around the country. And guess what? They don't have more police officers. They don't have more resources. They don't have a bigger budget. It's still just them. But when you incorporate not only the crime wave that we already have existing in our own country, then you add that the illegal aliens to that formula, that the ones that do commit crimes. Well, guess what? They tell me, Victor, something's got to give. We don't. We are at a point where we got to pick and choose where to go, and then who suffers? Well, people suffer, and public safety suffers. And eventually, when you go to the border, the bigger picture is the national security of this country suffers. And I think that's where we're at. And I think you understand that very clearly. And that's one of my biggest things, is that public safety and national security is where I think if we don't have that, forget everything else. Because if we're not safe in our country, if we're not safe in our own neighborhood, then everything else kind of goes out the window. And by the way, that happens to be the responsibility of every government of every level, from your local government, parish, to the federal government, is to keep us safe. That's the first and really priority. And when that is ignored, as a matter of fact, not only at the federal level, but a lot of it at the state level and local level from a lot of these sanctuary cities and blue cities, well, then you see what we're seeing now. And to me, it's no surprise. People are now all of a sudden like, oh my God, these horrific crimes are happening. Oh, well, what did you expect? What did you expect was going to happen when you have approved of this? And then when I say you, I'm not being accusatory here. I'm just being real in the fact that sometimes people are not involved. And I know you want to talk about that. Well, you all of a sudden now care because now it hit your street, because maybe it's a family member. God forbid it's you or someone that you know or your family member that became a victim at the hands of one of these people. Well, guess what? It's too late at that point. You should have done something before that happens. So my role here is to try to do something before that happens. And it's very frustrating as it continues to happen, trying to slow it down and make these jurisdictions, these cities, these towns across the country aware of what was coming a long time ago. Believe me, I didn't start saying it yesterday. I've been saying it for a long time. And unfortunately, it's been coming true because we saw it. I'm not the only expert that saw this coming, but we saw it coming. Like, what did you expect if you empty the Venezuelan prisons and you let them in? What did you think was going to happen here? Well, there's going to be a lot of Venezuelans committing crimes in the United States. The same thing with Ecuadorians, the same thing with Hondurans. By the way, the same thing with Mauritanians from Africa and Somalians and Chinese. And all of a sudden, we're not talking Mexicans and Central Americans anymore. We're talking about special interest aliens, of people that all of a sudden might have a very different interest in our country and why they're coming in. And that's the scary part.
Well, you mentioned something too, that another economic impact that I was talking to a sheriff, and he was talking about part of the problems that we have with our prisons. The sheriffs, of course, they run the prisons and or they man them, I should say, and they, yep, and they have. I think it was a recent report by the federal. I just pulled this up by the Federal Bureau of Prisons reported that as of recent reports, 20 to 25% of federal inmates, that's federal, are non-citizens.
I'll tell you real quick, I can attest to that 100% because I'm from El Paso, Texas, and I worked in El Paso, Texas. And I always said this, I think maybe 80% of the jail in El Paso County Jail.
Yeah, they can't even give a number. Yeah, they can't give a number on states because it varies state to state significantly. Like obviously, Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and California are going to have much, much higher numbers. But I would assume that they are extremely high. And so when you think about that, right, that doesn't just affect the mouths and the beds, right? People that are in prison. That means that somebody that maybe is a violent offender that needs to be behind bars, but maybe he's just been convicted of maybe he's not been convicted of murder. Maybe he's just convicted of beating somebody up. That means that they're going to put that guy out on an ankle bracelet because they don't got room in the jail for him. it means that rapists might get get bail, or they might get home incarceration versus being in the prison because they don't have the beds for them. This is serious stuff, and it also impacts the courts. The courts are so overrun and overwhelmed, with criminal cases. And how many of I'd like to see if there's somebody do some research to find out how many cases, involve illegal aliens, and how much is that affecting our courts and and the ability to be able to clear cases. So
let me answer that really quick, because that's a very important point. So most states do not report illegal alien crime. Texas is one of the few that does. All crime statistics are then led by the FBI and put into the Uniform Crime Report. Well, the Uniform Crime Report doesn't differentiate between an American or an illegal alien committing a crime. That has to change. Another thing that has to change is if these local jurisdictions do not report this, and they're not reporting, a lot of the times they're hiding this information. Why? Because they don't want people to know that there are illegal aliens committing crimes against U.S. citizens in their community. So they hide that statistic. They won't even bring it out. Nobody will know. And so that needs to be known, because I think awareness obviously is the key here to know. And if you have statistics, and if the Uniform Crime Report was actually accurate, we would actually then be able to then allot the resources that the money goes to from the federal government to these jurisdictions the way it's supposed to. But because these jurisdictions, as a matter of fact, you'll hear the left right now say, well, the crime statistics actually show that crime is down in the United States. You've heard them say this. You know why? Because the Uniform Crime Report actually shows that. But our lying eyes are telling us something very different, that crime is out of control. Well, how can I be seeing the reality in front of me, but the report is saying something else? That is a big problem here. And another thing I want to say real quick about prosecutions. This is the other part of the jurisdiction of the federal government that really needs to have a big look at, because every police department, every federal agency could go out there and enforce the law and arrest people. But if you don't have the prosecutions behind you, it means nothing. So the state level, you have these George Soros bought DA that will decline prosecution. They will literally say, we're not going to prosecute this person, even though we're not even going to hold them. We're gonna release them.
Cashless bail, release them, and then they go out and murder somebody.
Correct. And so the same thing is happening at the federal level. They're declining prosecution because it's a Biden administration. Remember, it's the entire administration. And so you have this big system that is working against our public safety.
Victor, normally my show is only an hour long. We're almost at the hour. I'd like to continue and go into a second hour, if that's okay with you. There's a lot more questions that I would like to ask. I want to get into talking about our relationship with Mexico, and specifically current state of collaboration between the U.S. and Mexico. And I know you've got some expertise in that area. I do need to take a moment to give a word for our sponsors, and then we'll be right back to get into a lot more detail on this, and specifically get into foreign policy as well. So thank you for joining us.
Next up, we have Julius here, and he's from his company, Eco Inventions.
That's correct.
And he has the Eco Washer. Now, I see it says never buy laundry detergent again.
Right.
I think the laundry detergent people are going to be after this.
Yeah, they're probably not going to like you. What can my Eco Washer Special Edition model do? Everything. We eliminate all the toxic poisons in your home. No more detergent, no more fabric softeners, no more hot water. Sound too good to be true? It's not. Where did this technology come from? This technology literally came from the hospital industry. There's a super expensive commercial Oculus ozone laundry system used in hospitals worldwide. How did we create the Eco Washer SE? We simply miniaturized it using the advent of microtechnology. These are like a solid state computer. No filters, no fillers, no ingredients, nothing. It runs the water through and transforms the water into an unlimited supply of nature's pure detergent and nature's pure cleaning supplies that will mop your floors, wash your carpet, take pesticide off of your fruits, veggies, fish, meats, and it'll make everything last much longer when you put it in the refrigerator. Hey, stop supporting these corporate chemical villains and step up and get your EcoWasher SE today. The new EcoWasher SE is a chemical-free laundry and cleaning solution. Imagine, no more detergent, no more chemicals, saves you money, pays for itself, gives you a healthier life, and simplifies doing laundry. And now, we're going to include 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis that purifies your home and sanitizes your surfaces like a thunderstorm in nature, eliminates all odors. Plus, you're receiving $100 off by using code podcast on the new EcoWasher SE. Let me remind you, 2 free Thunder Pure Safe Air Minis plus $100 off during this podcast. Podcast is your coupon code at ecowasher.com.
Military use when they need unlimited power during critical missions. Civilians like you can now get their hands on the exact same technology within 24 hours for pennies on the dollar. Folks, as a former infantry soldier, I can tell you this is the best and cheapest way to get reliable, unlimited energy. And no, I'm not talking about regular generators or the expensive solar panels. You don't have to be an electrician to do it. There's no maintenance needed. It doesn't take up a lot of space. And the best part, you won't need to rely on the power grid anymore. Click below now and hit play.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
And we're back, and a big thank you to our sponsors for the show. They help us keep this show going. You can look in the show notes and find the coupon codes to use. Please do take a look at these products. And, don't forget also to like and subscribe to the show. So, Victor, in this second hour, I want to get into some other things here. One of the things that I want to talk about is Mexico's role in border security. That is one area where I don't feel like too many people talk about. And, you're in a unique position to have some knowledge about, how the U.S. works with Mexico or doesn't work. And so my question is what is the current state of collaboration between the U.S. and Mexican authorities on border security, and what areas need improvement?
The current state of between the U.S. and Mexico when it comes to border security is non-existent. As a matter of fact, the outgoing president, AMLO of Mexico, twice tried to get rid of the DEA agents assigned in Mexico by refusing to renew their visas, not only their visas to work in Mexico, but their visas to reside in Mexico. Just when I went as a diplomat, I not only get a black diplomatic passport, but I get permission from the government of Mexico with a visa to reside in Mexico and a visa to work in their country. And so because of a lot of other issues and cases that the DEA had brought, effective cases, by the way, Mexico at one point, as a matter of fact, one as recent as a couple of months ago, tried to not renew their visas, the DEA agents housed and living in Mexico. So it's not good. The relationship, when I was there from 2008 to 2011, it was a very good relationship. It was very open, It was the government of Mexico allowed us to do a lot of things hand in hand. We were there on a multifaceted mission, not only working the narcotics cases, the human trafficking, and everything else in between, but also we were there as trainers. We were training the Mexican federal government on how to conduct criminal investigations, basic criminal investigations, like do not interview two people in the same room at the same time, stuff like that, you know? And so, but right now I could tell you that relationship is not well. It's not well, and it has to change.
Now, it was quite a bit different under the Trump administration. You know, I remember, you know, Trump was able to get Mexico to enforce shutting their southern border, and you know, which prevented a flood of illegals coming from, you know, all these other countries. Because I can't remember if it's Ecuador or one of these countries that's down there. There's basically no visa requirement, so you got people that come in and then they travel through the you know, through the jungles basically to make their way to Mexico and make their way up.
That's Nicaragua.
Nicaragua, thank you.
Nicaragua just recently changed their visa requirements to allow all these Chinese nationals and all the other people, the nationalities that we're talking about, come through their country, fly into Nicaragua, from Nicaragua, then into Mexico, Mexico into the U.S. But you're right. So comparing this to what Trump did, and I want to kind of take you back a few years, because if you remember, that's when those caravans started coming over, hundreds of people. And then Trump said, wait a minute, what the heck is going on down there, man? Yep. And so he said, I'm gonna do two things. I'm gonna hold Mexico accountable by, one, I'm gonna be imposing tariffs, a 25% tariff on everything that comes in through that Mexican border. That got their attention really quick. That was not gonna happen. Mexico was not gonna allow that to happen because they don't like anything that touches their pocketbook, as corrupt as they are. Second, he said, I'm going to designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Boy, they really didn't want that to happen. My colleagues and I were cheering on and hoping that it would happen, because I've been advocating for that designation to happen for a long time. Nevertheless, it worked. And Mexico did exactly that. They said, okay, hold on. We are going to do our part. And they started securing their border. They put their own National Guard down there. And all of a sudden, the flow of people, you know, trickled down to a few people. And it worked. Well, things have changed now. There's different presidents. There's a new one, the female here, Claudia Sheinbaum, where not only does President Trump need to do that, you have to now go above and beyond that. That no longer works. Not yes, designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, but now you have to go further, and I'm talking about embargoes. I'm talking about sanctions.
I agree.
And it sounds horrible, right?
People and not just on Mexico, but also
blah blah blah. Listen, we need to protect our country and we need to protect our sovereignty. And I'm the first one to tell you, there'll be sacrifices made in this country because stuff that's in my house and probably in yours came through a truck in the southern border. And there's billions of dollars that legitimately come through that border. But here's the problem, Nate, is that right now you have to grab people's attention, because I'm a believer that we can have a regular and legal trade and have a secure border at the same time. You can do both. And for some reason, they think that if we do one, you can't have the other. Oh, we're going to shut it down. People think we're going to shut the government down. And I'll be very honest with you. I don't like that term. It's not a real term when you say shut the government, shut the border down, because they're not really going to shut the border down. People work and come through that border every single day for very different reasons, business reasons, personal reasons, whatever. You can't shut the border down. What you can do is limit what comes through that border and who comes through that port of entry.
And trade is trade is a very, very impactful tool that Trump seemed to understand and use quite well. Tariffs he used, to get, to basically get fairer trade for the United States. But I've looked at it like this: we should be putting embargoes on, on China for their, illicit sale of the precursor chemicals to the cartels. We should be telling China, You want to do business with the United States, stop killing our people and start going after these companies that are selling the precursor chemicals. We should designate the cartels as terrorist organizations. And I think that we need to obviously use diplomatic means to work with the Mexican government to say, hey, look, you have terrorists within your country that are attacking our nation. So you either do something about it and we will help you and we will work with you, or we're going to enter into your sovereign territory and we're going to clean out, these nests of terrorists. I mean, why do we spend billions of dollars in the Ukraine, a war that has absolutely nothing to do with the United States? We spent millions of dollars, billions of dollars on wars in the Middle East, but we have a war right now on our southern border. And I absolutely think that we need to, if there's any area where there was a cause, a requirement for us to do something to defend ourselves, it should be there. And
by the way, I'll add something. Mexico, because Mexico, the first thing they're going to say, oh, we're a sovereign nation. We're never going to allow you. As a matter of fact, they already said that. We're not going to allow you to come in here, blah, blah, blah. But this is where we tell them, this is the reality. This is a solution for not just United States, for Mexican citizens themselves that have been killed.
That's right.
You're going to be protecting everybody here, by the way. Oh, by the way,
that's right.
When I say I'm not going to protect Republicans and conservatives. I want everyone protected. I don't want anyone to be a victim at a crime. This people don't understand is I advocate for a safe country of all, not just of one group of people. And that Mexico would benefit very, very much so in securing their country as well.
Well, the problem is that many of the politicians are bought off, and probably some of them may even be in league with members of the cartel. And I would not doubt that at all. I mean, we see that, we see corruption in our own government, not necessarily with cartel, but with other kinds of cartels, the drug companies, the big tech corporations, the technocracy. So it's hard to get things done legislatively, but to me, it's a humanitarian crisis. And more importantly, it is a national security crisis that does require our involvement. And to be honest with you, and maybe this is, maybe this is a little thick-headed, but I'm of the opinion that Trump should tell Mexico, look, you're going to cooperate with us, or we will enter without your permission, and we will take out these cartels, and we will annex the land that those cartels were in and expand our border by another 10 miles. I mean,
I like that. So by the way, here's another solution.
Sure.
And we talk about the financial impact on that. The money, the remittances that are being sent back. And I'm just going to talk about Mexico right here. Last year, $63 billion were sent back by illegals in the United States back to Mexico. 63 billion. With a B, that means that Mexico is depending on their economy for that money. Well, guess what? That money no longer goes back. One, either we heavily tax it at a minimum, or we don't even let you send that money out because that money is not staying here to incorporate it into our economy.
We control the banks. We could tell them you're not going to allow for any kind of SWIFT transaction. Of money going to a bank in Mexico, period. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
That could be easily and quickly implemented. Do you think Mexico wants to lose $1 billion? They don't. And so they know that. But it just happens to that we need a person like Donald Trump that's going to come in and have the will of the people to do it.
Yeah, what you just talked about, that's actually something that has been quite difficult for us to deal with when it comes to the Islamic, world, because they have a whole system of banking that is not tied in, with the national banks, where they're able to pass money, and it goes through and there's no interest and all this other stuff. But absolutely with Mexico, we should be doing that, because you're right. I forgot about that, but Well, I remember learning about that when I was growing up in California, about how much money leaves the economy of the U.S. and goes down to Mexico and is spent down there. And
They're building their houses.
That's right.
They're supporting their families. They're supporting their businesses.
And as long as Mexico's being a good neighbor, I could care less. But as long as they're doing stuff that's not good for our country, or they're allowing stuff to take place on our border, I do have a problem with it. And
it's the old help me help you, right? We're neighbors, and I get it. Okay, we're neighbors, but at this point, my neighbor has terrorists in their law in my backyard here, in their yard, in my neighbor's yard. This is the way I think of it. You know, I'm a simple person. As if my neighbor has terrorists over there, or I'll put it to you this way: if my neighbor's branch of his tree pokes my eye every time I come out of my house, at one point I have to address it with my neighbor and say,
that's right.
Either you cut down this branch, or I'm gonna have to cut it, and I'm gonna have to go into your yard and cut it for you. And so because we want to get together and be in harmony here. One point, someone has to do some kind of action. You know what? Because people say all the time, they call me names because I want to put America first. But you know who puts Mexico first? Mexico. You know who puts Afghanistan first? Afghanistan. You know who puts Venezuela first? Venezuela. So for some reason, if I want to put America, United States of America first, it's a bad thing. Well, I'm kind of sick and tired of that. I want to put America first. I want there to be consequences for those that do not want that, because again, I'll reiterate, those things that I want for America to be first will flourish for everyone and will benefit everyone and will make everybody's life better, and the economy will be better for everybody. Trump didn't when Trump was president, he didn't everybody was advantageous to the tax cuts. Everybody was. Right. Everybody was advantageous to the secure border. And so this is what I think people, I believe it or not, I think the Democrats are actually going through that right now, where they're realizing, like, wait a minute, maybe they've been lying to us just a little bit. And so we have to make some very, very serious changes here. And I think that you're going to see, I think it might be, this is my optimistic view mixed in with the pessimism, because I'm not a fearmonger, but I'm a realist, that it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think here in the next several months, they're not giving up. These people are evil, and they're going to fight tooth and nail.
Yeah, I agree, and I think economically, I think we're going to see some major challenges with the loss of the U.S. dollar as being the world's reserve currency, and the loss of the petrodollar. Interestingly enough, that's another area where Mexico is not being a friend of the United States. They've joined the BRIC nations. They are actively working against our economy, and that's another area that is totally preventable, because we have something that the rest of the world wants, and it's called energy. And we have massive amounts of shale oil and natural gas. We could be, a net exporter like we were under Trump. And that would have a huge impact in driving down prices, for everyone, not just the United States, but for other countries as well. And that's something that I don't see. The current administration is not going to do anything.
By the way, Nate, Mexico's dollar, peso, their currency has strengthened over the last 3.5 years, and this is where it gets scary, because believe it or not, this is the weirdest thing. Despite all the violence and all the crime and everything that happens in Mexico, their economy is actually not the worst. We have corporations moving into Mexico because their peso is getting stronger. It was at one point 24-1, the exchange rate. It's down to 16-1. That's why is that happening? Because the dollar is losing its power and is losing its value.
That's right.
Why? Because of what we talked about, because of the remittances. It diminishes the value of the dollar, and actually, believe it strengthens their currency. So the way I see it, the United States is always getting the short end of the stick there. We're the ones always getting punished. Look. And China seems to be flourishing. Mexico seems to be flourishing, and all these other countries. except for ours.
Yeah. Well, I was looking at, my wife had a cracked tooth, and the insurance in America for dental is just ridiculous. Like, you get nothing for all the money that you spend on it. And it's just unbelievable how much you have to put out for, just to get your teeth fixed. And I was looking into, these foreign vacations, right? And Mexico was on the list as a place where you can go to get dental, like top of the line dental work, and get a vacation while you're at it.
Yeah.
And it's like, how in the world do they have better medicine in parts of Mexico than they do in the United States, and and cheaper at that? It just blows my mind. So, we've got some serious problems, I think, in our country. But all those problems, they all stem, all the economic problems that we have here, they all stem from government regulation, government sticking their nose in it, socialism. These look at the things that are screwed up the most, right? Public education and healthcare, and those are the two most government controlled industries, in our country. I mean, that they basically they follow a quasi socialist economy. We don't know what one doctor charges for a X-ray versus another. There's no competition. There's nobody knows, because of the insurance companies and the way that they're like a cartel. And so it's really a terrible thing. But this money supply issue is going to have an impact on us, I think, economically. We're already seeing massive deflation of the value of the U.S. dollar, and that's just going to continue, and that will drive inflation. I believe it's going to ultimately lead to hyperinflation. I'm no economist, but this is what economists have been talking about for years, that if we ever lost the dollar as a world reserve currency, because the way the Fed operates, they basically just print money like it's going out of style, and they've always had a way of getting that money out of circulation through countries having to basically convert to U.S. dollars to buy oil, and that's how we were able to remove those dollars from circulation. But that's not happening anymore.
But they refuse to cut the rate, man. Even the Fed, I think yesterday, they still refused to cut it. They still refuse to help out. And I think you and I feel the same way about the Fed anyway. But anyway, another thing that came to my mind is part of the economy and part of Mexico and this whole part. Another solution, if you will, is we talked about the remittances and the money being sent back, but there has to be accountability with and Trump kind of did it a little bit. He didn't get quite to it, but I think now when he gets in there later this year, I think now he'll address it with Mexico, and that's really talking about deportations. And I think he needs to.
I was just going to ask. I was going to go there on my next set of questions.
Well, and I know I think it's a natural way to say it here, because believe it or not, I think you've heard President Trump say that the biggest mass deportation ever, whatever, and I agree with it. If I have anything to do with that, a role there, I would love to see having these nations as a negotiation tool to say, listen, ask your people to come back to your country and have them self-deport themselves. Because I think that a lot of the illegals in the U.S. are going to realize when Trump gets in, they're going to realize, oh shit, I better leave. I better go, because I'm not going to be able to afford to be looking over my shoulder all the time and wait to see when they come and get me. So I think there has to be an opportunity by the Trump administration to say, listen, I'm going to give you a certain time. I don't know what that time frame is. Let's do 3 months, per se, 3 or 6 months. Get your businesses in order, get your stuff, and go on your own, so we won't have to come and get you, because we will. This whole nonsense about, oh, we don't know where they're at. Believe me, that's nonsense. We do know where they're at. We will find you and we will deport you. But here's the other incentive. You talk to Mexico, you talk to Venezuela, you talk to these countries, and you say, let's talk about this. Let's work a deal where you the country of where these people are from are asking them and basically telling their own citizens, come back,
Yeah.
because not, it's going to be hell for us. So come back now, and maybe there'll be an incentive for you to get your people out, and that's how you are going to expedite a large number of people out.
And when I was campaigning, of course, this issue, comes up a lot. And I think it was probably number one issue on, that and the economy, right? The border and the economy, the two most important issues to everybody I talked to. And I had thought long and hard about this. And I come from somebody who is grown up in Southern California. I know a lot of people, some of them really good people that, have come to America illegally, but have made a life here and all of that. And I was thinking about, like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the inevitability that you get all these children here illegally? All of this. And I realized, you don't have to, I'm trying to remember the phrase. I think it's like, how do you eat a well, right? One bite at a time. You don't sit there and try to shove the whole thing down your throat. And one of the things that to me it makes sense to do is we focus on, first of all, breaking it down into different, like any kind of project, right? You got to break it down. And you start with the low-hanging fruit. Let's get every single one of these guys who is a criminal, a violent criminal, a drug criminal, a sex criminal, and get them the hell out of our country. Yeah. And I think that should be priority number one, and empower the police to be able to not only, don't just empower them, by saying it's okay. No, demand. Say, if you are these people have committed crimes. Make a law that says that if you're in law enforcement and you find out that somebody is not here legally and they've been arrested, for certain violent crimes, sex crimes, drug crimes, you have a requirement to notify the federal government, to notify ICE. And if you don't, there will be consequences. That's going to be aiding and abetting, a criminal. They need to do away with these sanctuary cities and use the federal laws to their advantage for that purpose. Now, I think that you start there, you go after the low-hanging fruit, because what Democrat's going to stand up and say, no, we need to keep every rapist, every murderer, every drug dealer, there are a few out there. That's crazy. There might be, but I think that's going to be a hard sell, for most people to try to sell that that's a good idea to keep them in our country. No, start there. Then the second step of that would be to get rid of all the people that are here that are basically sapping our systems, that are using, basically your basic services and things like that. And this easiest way to deal with that and getting these people to self-deport is remove, make it a law, go to your state, go to the federal government. The federal governments pay a lot of money to the states for things like welfare and other things, hospitals you mentioned earlier and stuff like that. And the federal government says, we're not paying anymore. We will not pay for any illegals, to be on welfare, to be on, and that. So I think that's another thing that needs to happen. And you move the goalposts. The Democrats are good at this. They move the goalposts all the time. We need to do it too. Start with the guys. Oh, we don't. We're not worried about the people that are not committing crimes, they're violent crimes while they're here. We're just focused on them. Then once we've got that, issue addressed, then we move the goalposts. Say, okay, you know what? Even though these guys may not be committing violent crimes, they're committing crimes that are hurting the economies and that are hurting the communities, that are taking, critical services away from the elderly, from veterans, from, those that have, special needs, that, may be disabled. American citizens that have paid into the system, and these other people are using these systems, and we need to cut them off from that. And that includes, education. How many of these people are using and abusing the education system? So when we talk about all of this,
here's another group that you don't hear a lot about is the overstays.
That's right. And then
there's more overstays in this country than any other group.
The guys that blew up, the Twin Towers, they were overstays.
Yeah.
They didn't cross over through the Mexican border. And then we have a lot of threats that are overstays. Now, the other thing to me that makes sense is once you've kind of addressed those two issues, now you've got what's left is the people that are here that are working, maybe they're productive, maybe they started a small business or something, but they came here illegally, and you need to create a path for them to get legal, but it should include having to leave the country. And what you were just talking about, you give them a period of time. You say, look, here's the deal. You came here under a corrupt administration that maybe gave you the impression that you could come here and live here. And so, we're not, we don't see you as a threat, to our country. But the fact is there's a lot of people waiting in line, and you came in, through the back door illegally. And in order for us to ever give you any kind of semblance of, a green card or something like that, you have to leave the country and go through a port of entry and register. And what I would suggest is that we have a different type of green card, a green card that basically says, look, you go through, we'll speed up the process as long as you can prove you have a job and you've got support, and you're not going to be a strain on, on our economy or on our social services. But we make it so that they don't get a benefit that people who come here get. And we say, look, whatever the length of time it is for you to be able to have the opportunity to become a citizen, it's now double. And it starts at the moment that you exit and re-register and come in the right way. So instead of a green card, it might be a beige card or whatever. And so, special circumstances or whatever, but you're going to have to wait longer. You're going to have to pay a small fine, and you're going to have to exit and come back in legally. Then and only then can we, give you a legal means of being here and maintaining your life here. And then at that point, I think we have to make it very clear. Whenever this announcement is made, you got X number of days to make your arrangements, get out of the country and come back the right way. If you don't, and you come back, or if you stay here and we catch you, and we might catch you in a traffic stop, because we're going to make it so that the police can, they can ask for your and that's the other thing too, these driver's licenses issues where states are issuing driver's license to illegal. Again, aiding and abetting. They need to make a federal law against aiding and abetting, anybody that's committing a federal crime. And it's real simple. We go and we start doing these types of things. You make it so that their life is not going to be one that's worth living, because what we will tell them is if you're caught, not only will you be deported, but you will never again, ever be allowed into our country, ever, period. You will be on a permanent list that says that you're never allowed back in our country. And so, if people are faced with those kind of options, reasonable options that say, hey, look, as long as you're not somebody that's, out there committing rape, murder, incest, drug dealing, violent crime, but you have a job, you're not using and abusing our social services, and then we'll figure out a way to make it so that you can come back legally with a special kind of green card, to where you're restricted from becoming an American citizen until you've basically, gone through double the amount of time.
It's a vetting process, right?
Yeah. And the other thing too, I think that would be important to add to that, I think that's even more important than even fining them, because fining them might put them into a situation where they need help. But maybe a better way of saying is you're going to do community service in the community that you live. You're going to go and sweep the streets. You're going to go and just like anybody else that commits a crime that has to do community service. To me, it makes perfect sense. You're going to go clean up the homeless encampments, where all these, people once were that we've, booted out. So to me, that's the kind of thing that would, I think, give an appreciation for this country. One of the things that I don't agree with, and I absolutely don't want to see, is for them to give an opportunity for illegal aliens to join the military. That should never happen. To me, joining the military, it is yes, it is a sacrifice, but it is also a privilege, to serve in the military. And I've seen firsthand, and I can tell you, we have a program already where people can come in legally or they can get a green card, they can basically go and serve in the military and shorten their amount of time before they can, apply for citizenship. And that's been fairly good. I've seen, I was with a guy in one of my Army units that was from, I think he was from Nigeria. And, he was going through the process and getting his citizenship early because of it. I don't have a problem with that, but that shouldn't make up the bulk of the military, because you want loyal citizens that are part of the military. And the other thing too is I think that you've got I've seen this at least in Japan and in Korea, that multiple times, and maybe it's anecdotal, I haven't looked at any research on it, but multiple times where I've seen murders that have occurred in some of these foreign countries where where I've served in, it's almost always, a foreigner that's in the U.S. Army, somebody that has a very different culture than us. One of the cases was in Japan, where a guy, took a taxi cab ride all the way from Tokyo down to Yokosuka Naval Base, and he gets out, and the guy, he owed a lot of money, because it's a huge expense to go all the way from Tokyo down to Yokosuka. And so what did he do? He stabbed the guy with a steak knife, rather than pay the amount that he owed. And, and there's been situations like that, and rapes and murders and things that have happened. And it seems like there's an awful lot, that like a disproportionate number of these people are not American citizens, but they're people who are serving in the U.S. military that are coming from, war-torn countries and things like that, where things are very different.
And maybe we'll find out who really actually wants to come and be part of the United States of America and be American. Not just want to be, taking in the fruits of our country, but also giving back. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about solutions and, future steps. We've been kind of doing that right now, at least in terms of Mexico and all that. But, what effective, what is the average citizen? What can they do? Let's start there, because the people that are listening to this, they're not likely in government. They're not likely going to be able to have any influence on Mexico. But what can they do? What kind of policies should they be advocating for, to their representatives, to their state legislatures? Because there's, that's the other thing that we forget is, we've got state legislatures that can do things too. So, give me some of your thoughts on that.
I'm a big advocate for being involved at the local level. I think all politics are local, and I think now we're at a different time in our country where I think it's a duty of our citizens to be involved. And so I ask people, when they ask me what can I do, a lot of times people say, oh, we got to go and vote. Yeah, okay, whatever, go vote. You need to be involved, and you need to be aware of what's going on in your hometown. Don't worry about the federal government. And sometimes people think that, do I need to call the White House? No. How about finding out who represents your neighborhood? Who is your
get to know your local
man or woman? Who's your county commissioner? Do you know their name? Do you know their phone number and email? Because guess what? You can get in touch with them because they work for you, and you can have a cup of coffee with them so you can prod them to see if they in fact are looking out for you. And I'm talking about not only from the pothole that's in front of your house and lighting, but I'm talking about the decisions that they get to make that we all kind of discovered when people didn't know how much power these people had in 2020 during COVID, when they were the ones that kept you from going into the business. It wasn't the federal government or the governor.
Right.
It was your local city council mayor or county commissioner or county judge or parish, however you call them in your area, that made that decision, and you voted them in. Do you know who they are?
Yeah.
How about
your local DA?
This is where you make the difference, because believe it or not, one is being aware. And by being aware, I mean, you start paying a little bit of attention, and just by paying attention, you'd be surprised how much more you're going to want to know. Because once you start paying attention, you're going to start listening to what's actually happening in your neck of the woods. So then that's going to prompt you to maybe go to one of these meetings. Go to one of these city council meetings or county commissioners meetings to see what these people are actually deciding to do with your tax dollars. And you'd be surprised what they're deciding to do when you're not there, when no one is there. They're making huge decisions that impact, guess what? Your children at your school and you, where you live. That's where I think you make the big difference, because there, then you go to your state rep and maybe your governor or whatever, but that's the trickle effect that happens here. This is how you make the difference, by getting involved. It's so rewarding. I've been involved for many years now, and it's very rewarding to even the mayor of their town, or even for them to know that who you are, for them to know that you care. And the more of us that are that involved, I know we're all busy. I know we all have bills to pay and soccer practice. I get it. But I think we have a duty as Americans to be involved in your community. And that's the way you do it. And that's how you make a difference.
What advice do you have for law enforcement, specifically local law enforcement, in dealing with some of these challenges? Like I said, West Virginia, it's becoming, it's a slowly growing problem here. The drugs is probably the biggest problem, but we are beginning to see, some of these migrants that are moved in by the federal government. And what we've seen a lot of Somalis and stuff like that, they get put in to some of our towns, and then they leave and they go to DC and join the mafia and stuff. What advice do you have for law enforcement, and as former law enforcement yourself, and the challenges that they deal with? What are some of the things they can do?
One of the big ones that comes to mind is that, and this is a tough one. This is a tough one because in the last several years, I noticed where mayors of towns and county judges of counties all of a sudden were dictating to our law enforcement officials, to our chiefs of police, and to our sheriffs. By the way, our sheriffs have a lot of power. They were dictating to them what they can and cannot enforce. For example, the riots. Oh, no, you can't arrest them. Oh, the thefts. Oh, you can't arrest them for doing that. This is where I think the local police really have to really tighten up and say, is this the type of am I gonna follow this? And it's believe me, it's easier said than done, because I've seen it happening with Border Patrol, where they're being put in this horrible situation. They've been demoralized and they've been trapped. And a lot of people say, hey, well, you took an oath. Why don't you just disagree to do it? And no, well, they got to pay bills, and they got pensions, and they're the sole providers of the family, and all these other things happen. Yeah. So, but when it comes to law enforcement at that local level, I think that they have to be visible. I think they have to be, they cannot be in the shadows. They have to be very, very active in their communities and commingle with the community, to be part of the community and say, listen, we're just like one of you. We're just a taxpayer like you. I have to go to the grocery store and pay twice as much just like you do as well. And so I think when you get that community, remember the old community law enforcement? Yeah. Well, I think we have to go back to that, because it worked. It worked in New York when
cops walking a beat and getting to know the area and getting to know the people that that live in that community.
So when what hits the fan, they already have that understanding with the community members. They know who's on the right side, who's not, who's cooperating, who's not, who's good, who's the criminal, and a lot of things are worked out beforehand by meet with your chief of police. Why not? People think that these things are unattainable, like, oh, I can't talk to them. Yes, you can. You're the taxpayer. You pay their salary. Now, it's all with respect and with this approach that you want to be a part of the solution. You're a community member, that you're available for the police. You're available for your county commissioner. You're available to them as a member of the community to see how you can help.
Yeah. On that note, I know that there are some great organizations out there that are doing some things. I think you're a part of some of those. Tell us about what you're doing now and what you're involved with, and how can folks support that and help that, and give us a little bit of insights into that.
I'm going to give you to Border 911, border911.com. This is an educational type of nonprofit where this is CEO Tom Homeland, the ex-director of ICE under President Trump, and other experts we're going around the country educating people exactly about this conversation that you and I had in front of people and letting them know exactly how their community is being impacted. We were in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. We'll be in DC. We're going to be in Michigan. We're going to be in a lot of places around the country. So follow us there for a lot of the events at border911.com. As for me, you could follow me and help me by going to borderpatriotpac.com. I developed this pack after my race for Congress. I figured, I didn't make it for Congress, but there's other people that can. And I want to identify these other candidates that I will personally vet, I will personally endorse. But not only that, they have to be America First candidates, and they have to be obviously pro-border security candidates. But most importantly, I'm going to actually share the briefings with them. I am going to take them to the border if they want. Some of them are asking me to take them to the border because a lot of these candidates, and you know this, they're campaigning all over the country. By the way, these are candidates throughout the whole U.S., and they're all, I'm going to secure the border, but they really don't know what's going on. They've never even been to the border. And when I talk to them, they're like, oh, yes, please take me. I've never been. And so borderpatriotpac.com will allow me to do that.
That's great. That's great. We touched a little bit on violent crime, from the illegal alien community and the cartels and things like that. What are some of the things that, this is something that, we don't want to be fear mongering and all that, but what are some of the things that people can do to protect themselves? What are the situations that you see that are preventable that happen, far too often?
I hate to repeat this word, but it's to me, it's you have to be aware, and you have to be away from this for just a little bit. I call this La La Land, and I'm talking about. I happen to be a black belt in karate, and I know guns and all that, but that's not what protects me. What protects me is my level of awareness, and I'm not talking about paranoia here. I'm talking about just being aware of your surroundings. Believe me, that alone is when I walk outside from a grocery store, from the mall, from a garage at night. It doesn't matter where I'm at. I am aware of my surroundings, and that alone is going to protect me to keep me from putting myself in a situation where it's dangerous. Or if you find yourself, well, for example, people tell me, well, the illegals they don't live next to me. But you know what? They go to the gas station that you go to, and they go to the grocery store that you go to, and you might find yourself in there. So be aware. Listen. Are they listen? What language are they speaking? Look at their body. Are they have tattoos? Look at their body language. Are they friendly? I'm not saying because they're illegal they're going to commit an atrocious crime. I'm just saying you're aware of where they're at. You've identified them, and it doesn't mean that I don't look at you. Oh, don't look at me. I'm pretending not to see you so you won't see me. No, it's the opposite. I see you, you see me, and I got you right here. That just protected you from being a victim.
That's interesting. You mentioned that. I was in the Army, of course. They do a lot of training about OPSEC, right? Operational security, knowing your surroundings, and because of it, there's just certain things that were ingrained in me. When I go into a restaurant, I never sit with my back to the door. Never. Right. When I'm in church, I'm aware of where the entrances are into the church, and I'll be honest, man, I carry everywhere. I live in a state that is very pro Second Amendment, but I don't just carry. I practice. I practice shooting, and I try to be very good with my aim and my ability to to remove my gun from concealment quickly. And those are all things I think that are important. Not guns aren't for everybody. Not everybody has the wherewithal or the desire to carry, but there are other things that people can carry to defend themselves. And I certainly think that women in particular and people who are who are vulnerable need to pay extra special attention, especially in dark places where there's not well lit or it's always
My
a
daughter,
good
I have
idea.
a 24-year-old daughter. She has a rape whistle that I got her. But why? Because, and I got her some OC spray. She doesn't have a gun, but not only all the stuff that I've shared with you, I've shared a lot of stuff with her. And, but the awareness, but, you know, the other tools to get away, to bring attention to a possible situation where you want other people to turn around and look at you if something might happen. But I always tell her, you're always trying to avoid putting yourself in that situation.
Exactly.
You have to listen. You have to listen to your instinct here in your heart and in your gut. So many times, because of the society that we're in, especially this woke society, that all of a sudden you're going to be embarrassed or somebody's going to look at you funny. Who cares? Do not be a victim of the crime. If you're a female and there's 3 males in the elevator and you think you don't feel safe going into the elevator, don't. You're not going to offend anybody. The only thing you're going to do is protect yourself by not going into the elevator and taking the next one. Those are the type of decisions that will keep you safe.
Yeah. And it's sad that we even have to have that conversation, but the fact is, our country is changing, and you know, places that once were safe are not, you know, and we have to be aware. We have to have awareness. So, you know, I think I'll give you the last word. You know, I like to give you the last word, and then after that, I like to just close us out in prayer, and we'll end the show. But man, this has been an enlightening discussion, and again, I want to have you back on to, you know, get into the details of your story, because your stories, you know, it's just unbelievable, and you know what you've gone through, and I think people need to hear it, and I'm sure they would be fascinated by it. But if you would go ahead and any last comments, anything that you want to share that topics we didn't cover or anything like that?
No, it's been great. Thank you so much for allowing me to share what I'm very passionate about, is the protection of our sovereignty in our country. Together, we could definitely make a difference. And that's what I think people need to understand. It's not just one person here, one person there. It's a collective measure and a collective effort here. And thank you for allowing me to give my opinion and my decisions about what I want to do. I want to, like I told you earlier, I want to be in the middle of this decision making and solution, because I think I'm optimistic. I've gone through a lot, and because of that, I know that there is a solution, and I know that we have the ability to make this better. A lot of time, it's a lot of doom and gloom that we talked about, right? But nevertheless, I do see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I know that we will be in a better place. And yes, it has to do with God. It has to do with family. It has to do with country. And I look forward to coming back with you and sharing my story.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to pray, and then we'll exit out with the intro that we had coming in. So, Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for Victor, and I just pray your blessing over him and his family, and over his state of Texas, Lord, and as well as mine, the West Virginia, and our great country. Lord, we thank you for all of those that have served this country, that are protecting this country, that are doing the hard work, Lord, to keep us safe. We pray that you would keep them safe. And Lord, we pray that you would help us to restore our nation and restore those values, Lord, that have made this nation great. I pray that you would make this nation great again. Lord, we pray for godly leadership, and for those that will do the job well, to protect and secure our borders and restore our sovereignty as a nation. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Raise some cane. You gotta raise some cane. In the heartland where the faith runs strong, we've seen the shadows growing long. Watch those around us be deceived. Yeah, the fight is at our doors, no matter who we believe. Corruption, lawless day and night, we'll speak the truth into the light. We'll bring the battle, heed the call, watch the whole thing fall. We gotta raise some cane, show the lies, break some chains and make things right. Feel the power, be the change, time is now. We gotta raise some cane.